All right. Can you hear me, or am I just mic'd for the recording? Is it mic'd in the room too?
A little bit.
Okay. It feels so official when we have to use the mic, but ooh, there we go. Welcome to the Fall Colloquium. I'm Deirdre Henneberry, and I'm the Associate Director of the Museum Studies Program. And one of the best parts of my job is working with undergraduate and graduate students in finding and working through internship and practical experience placements. So the goal of the Colloquium is I'll say a few things about our program for people who maybe are sort of just dropping in to see what it's all about. And then we'll have some students share enlightening talks, some of their internship experiences. And so this is a casual, get more pizza, get a drink, but it's an opportunity to see what some of your colleagues might be doing on and off campus. So let me just share a few things about the Museum Studies minor. For those who are enmeshed in this or just about to finish, some of you, it has 3 core courses. Museums 301, Museums 401, and then Museums 409. That is the practicum, that is the internship class that you're going to hear students talking about their placements today. And we also have 3 elective courses. So these are drawn from across the university in many, many different departments and disciplines. And the goal is to have students explore things that really interest them, but maybe also try things that are a little bit outside of their wheelhouse. And so that is why we do have these 3 categories, these 3 thematic areas, and that we ask students to take courses from at least 2 of these. Because yes, there are students who want to take all of their courses and electives in one category. Something else that I want to draw your attention to is, and this is our minor website. Christy Elkins in the back there, she and I are going to be working a bit on the website, specifically the electives page this winter. So that's exciting. And thank you to many of the students who've had suggestions in some of our debrief conversations about how to make that a more helpful resource. But I also want to highlight here this button for the Museum Matters at Michigan blog. So this blog we launched about a year ago. It is, and here you can see some of the posts. This is a blog that bridges the undergraduate and graduate programs. So for me, it's a really exciting opportunity to have student research, student internship experiences, whatever it is that maybe students might be working on. It's a platform for them to share their observations and comments. So I encourage any of you, if you are working on a project, maybe you've been involved with an exhibit, maybe it's your internship, something that you would like to write about and have your work on this platform, just let me know. We do have an editor that works with students to prepare their work. So we're not just gonna toss you out into the deep end and hope you swim. There'll be lots of support, and I would love to see more undergraduate voices in our blog. So tuck that one away and sort of ruminate on if you think that might be right for you. Any questions about that? The blog, the program? No? Good. All right. So today we have a lineup of students who are going to share with us their work. You can see them listed here. We will go in this order. I'm going to jump up in between each of the presentations just to make sure we have the slides properly organized. And one of the things I'd like to point out here is that we have students, even in this sort of small selection, coming from many different departments. And this really is illustrative of the nature of the minor, that it is interdisciplinary, and we encourage and support students who are pursuing museum studies for many different reasons. So without further ado, a big thank you, of course, to all of you for joining us and to our presenters. I am going to now switch over to Josephine's presentation. I'll give this to you.
Wonderful. This is going to be very weird for me. I work in the planetarium at the Natural History Museum, and so I am used to wandering around and it not mattering where I look, because everyone's in the dark, they can't see me. So if I ever start going like this, please don't take it personally. I'm just very used to that format. I was doing something earlier this morning, I had the lights on so people could see me. I'm just like, so everybody, welcome. And I'm just not used to having eyes on me in this way. But as a sign, and I just said, I work predominantly in the planetarium at the Natural History Museum. Now, what is the Natural History Museum? Something in my time working there, I've noticed that not a lot of college kids actually go there. We primarily serve like kids with their grandparents or parents, and then occasionally college kids on dates. But not a lot of college kids by themselves will just wander in through our door. So that's something I want to change. So if any of you ever want to look around the museum, please ask me. I'm working there all the time. But this museum explores everything from the smallest cells to the near infinite scale of the universe. The dinosaurs in it, the people in it, we have a little bit of everything. So again, it's a really fantastic place to look. And this second segment is a little bit of our mission statement. If you've taken the museum studies courses, you know how important it is to look at those and make sure you're following those. So when I set out to create content for this museum, I looked at the mission statement. I had to make sure I fit in there somewhere, otherwise they weren't going to like my ideas. And so the Natural History Museum promotes an understanding of the natural world, our place in it, our impact on it. What I really focused on as an anthropology student is our place in it, what humans have done, good or bad, where we are and where we're going, and where we've been. And so at the Natural History Museum, I had two titles. And so I was a docent and an intern. Now, as a docent, I trained to operate the planetarium, so I can run movies and 45-minute star talks. I work in the public lab spaces, and so it's offering small-scale scientific experiments to anyone that walks in the door. Then Hobbs carts, which are hands-on discovery stations, again, little miniature rolling carts that can move throughout the museum and offer an in-depth look at some part of an exhibit that they're posted nearby. So we have like dinosaur dentists looking at teeth right next to the Majungasaurus, and we have Michigan rocks, talking about Michigan rocks, a geology cart. And so we're trained to do those, and then regular front desk stuff, hi, welcome in, here's a map, and special programming, because there's a woman named Brittany that oversees us all, but there's a lot of other people at the museum that work in science communication and going out to schools and middle schools and talking to them, and so the docents get plucked in. We're used to facilitate those events in the museum or just be ambassadors of the museum. Now, as an intern is what we actually want to talk about. So this image is my guy. This is Buddy Stark. He is the director and the kind of manager of the planetarium in which I worked at. Taught me everything: how to turn the system on, how to turn the system off, everything in between. All of it that I know about the planetariums comes from this guy, and so that's why I honored him in this photo. But I just want to give a little insight to why there's a strange man on my presentation. But yeah, he's Buddy Stark. He taught me every single thing that I know. But yeah, I wanted to create a planetarium show. A lot of people that do internships at the Natural History make Hobbs carts, the things I was describing earlier. Nothing against that. I just have always loved space, particularly fake space, and then Star Trek, Star Wars. My sister is nodding very, very intently. But yeah, Star Trek, Star Wars is always my thing, and so I said, well, I should probably learn about real space. And I was also inspired by my dad, who is a history professor back home, and he would tell us myths and fables every day on the ride to school. And so that's why I started getting interested in Greek mythology. And obviously, a lot of the constellations are named after figures in Greek mythology. So I put history that I learned as a kid, plus my anthropology degree, and science, smushed them together. And so we get what I end up creating for the museum. And I use it as a way to present multiple understandings of the world around us as ancient forms of knowing about the stars and explanations for why the stars behave in the way they do, or why they're shaped the way they are. And I use those to kind of think about life today. And so I did about 2 semesters worth of work. I took 409 twice is what that means. But I've got a full 15-page script, over 60 self-coded buttons, 12 animations, and so more still images and a bunch of sound effects, because the main problem with the planetarium industry is your audience falls asleep. And I will be honest, because I've fallen asleep while listening to Buddy. So that's a huge problem, because we have nice recliners in there, it's pitch dark, all of the students are operating on little to no sleep. people fall asleep. And so my thing that I really wanted to focus on was how do I make it more engaging? How do I keep people interested in actively listening to what I have to say? And so that's why I learned a lot of Photoshop skills, and I started animating little artworks and adding sound effects and that sort of thing. My little videos, I think will they show up? Yeah, there they go. Anyway, are they gonna play now? Yeah, so these are some of the little animations I made. So they are simple, but planetariums don't usually have animated stuff, so they flash through colors, Pegasus moves his wings, that sort of thing, and they're just always playing in the background while I talk. And so it hopefully draws attention a little bit more instead of the way that like stagnant art does. And so yeah, all of those things I made compile into 40-minute shows, and there's one based off of the fall constellations. They're seasonal, you can only see them during the wintertime, and then one based off of the wintertime constellations. And so it's like 2 full shows, and then what I really like about it is that it's modular, aka you can cannibalize parts from it and use them in other shows, you can shorten it, you can take the astronomy out of it. If you have like a social studies class coming in, they just want Greek mythology, you can put more astronomy into it and do a little bit less on the stories. So there's ways that you can adapt it like perfectly to your audience. Like there's a lot of sound effects. But I ran the show this morning for Dr. Henneberry and a lot of museum officials. I didn't do a lot of sound effects because they were all over 18. So I wasn't sure if they were going to appreciate it as much. But so you can change it, and the presenter, because I want this to live on after I graduate, whatever that presenter is, all of those buttons are already laid out for them. And one of the hardest things about being a presenter is making those judgment calls and reading your audience. But now you can kind of do that on the fly because things are a little bit separated out. And yeah, the art's engaging, it moves, it plays some weird sound effects. I know they didn't see it earlier, but Cetus is a sea monster. He makes a horrific, really low noise. So if anybody is asleep, they're gonna be up. And so there's just things like that is trying to beat the curse of falling asleep in a planetarium and just make it a little bit more engaging. And because all of this stuff is recorded, my boss has it all. Anyone after me can give it. This is not something that is going to die with me, which I think is really important. And it just fills a gap in the planetarium content and a gap that I feel is at the Natural History Museum as a whole. So we don't have a lot of cultural stuff. And I know there's a lot of problems that you can rapidly have with having cultural stuff in the Natural History Museum. But I think that bringing in the Greek constellations, which are already the set standard used by the International Astronomers Union, will hopefully avoid the problem of putting cultural stuff in a Natural History Museum. And that we have recorded cultural star talks, but live talks are just always better. That's kind of like the industry gold standard, is being to be able to have a live one. But yeah, and then I'll talk a little bit about the highlights and lowlights. Coding is definitely on both sides. Computer's not my strong suit, as you can tell. Buddy taught me everything. And so in this world, I think it's really helpful to start to learn coding, especially because I really like the planetarium. It's nice to see that background, but oh my gosh, I'm just yelling at the computer. I say, I know you know what I want you to do, but it doesn't because I skipped and I spelled something wrong or I didn't capitalize something. And so that was very frustrating. So like I would call Buddy in and be like, I can't get this to work. And he's like, is that how you spell that? I'm like, no, it's not. And then other highlights, I got to learn a lot of the Adobe Suite products. So Photoshop, Media Encoder, and a third one, After Effects. I got to use all those to create my animations. And then I got a lot of experience talking to the bosses, as I call them, all the people above me at the museum, because I really want this show that I made to possibly be like something that runs like once a month on a Saturday and is free to college students, and then they would like to come into the museum, and then we have more college students and we fix that problem too. That is a little bit more of a dream. I still have to talk to people about that, but that was kind of what I had in my head. And then for the rest of the negatives, it is really hard to spend a lot of time in the planetarium because it's just dark in there. There's no way around it. It's just, you come out, you go in early, it's dark outside. You go into work, no windows, it's dark in there. You come out of work, it's dark outside. Very, very much a problem in that, but I got through it, and now we're going to winter, so it doesn't matter anyway in Michigan. And then also burnout. It was very stressful. Like when I counted up the hours, it wasn't that much in like hour numbers, but I found it very hard to do like creative level work, and I was doing a lot of other, I'll be talking again at the next colloquium, that's a spoiler. I'm doing a lot of other creative work on the side too, and so it's just like, it was a lot to try to like be coming up with entirely new content, then I have to produce it all myself, and I have to code it all myself, and then I need to study it all. It was just a lot to be able to do. It was like a real product I was delivering at the end, not just like, I don't But yeah, so it was a lot. It was very worthwhile, but it was a lot. On the Connections to Museum Studies, this is an image from camp. Chloe, don't worry, I'm not talking about camp at all. That's what she's talking about. She is my fantastic coworker. But just, I think a lot about of museums as places of informal learning, and specifically within that, like just science communication and learning how to talk to all different types of people, because I think there's a big difference between simplifying something and dumbing it down. I think not everyone learns the difference and learns that skill, and I think it's one that's really important to have, especially in the Natural History Museum when you are talking to literally can't walk but wants to look at you and look at dinosaurs, and all the way up to like a retired person that is just looking for something to do on a Saturday. And so it's, you know, no one's stupid. They're just looking to learn something new, and so you have to be able to adapt how you're speaking and, you know, meet them at wherever they are and let them learn whatever they want to learn. And I think that's a really valuable skill, and that is something that I'm thankful for trying to learn, especially with doing camp and talking to those like 5-year-olds on up. Yeah, then just museums as accessible for all levels of interest. So whether that's ages, because there's parents that are like, oh my God, I'm at the museum for the 3rd time this week, and there's a kid who's like, show me that one dinosaur again. And so you have to like, you know, show something new to the parent while also showing that kid exactly what they want, because they know it and they love it. Like I have a lot of kids that come in and they're like, show me the Mosasaurus. And I'm like, wonderful. First I'm gonna Google what a Mosasaurus is, and then we're gonna see if we have it. We're not supposed to use our phones, don't tell anyone I do that. But I look it up, I was like, no, we don't have a Mosasaurus, but now I know something that we have that is like it. And so it's just really nice that this museum, because its collections and its displays are so diverse, that we have something for everyone. And so people come in saying they want this one exhibit, I'm like, oh, we have that, but we also have something that's similar, or something that might also pique your interest. And so yeah, I really enjoy the museum that I picked, which is nice. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. I can take questions and compliments.
Any questions? And maybe you could repeat the question so...
Yes, so the lecture gets it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any questions or comments for Josephine?
Wonderful.
Is there a lot of things to learn when you're working the planetarium?
Absolutely. So the planetarium is very intimidating. First of all, I like to make the joke that I study archaeology, I study the past, anything past stone tools and you got me lost. Yeah, no, I know. My girlfriend's like, answer the question. Oh, repeat the question. Oh, is there a lot to learn with the planetarium? Sorry. So yes, there is. Yes. Sorry, people watching at home. Yes, there is a lot to learn with the planetarium. So for me personally, with that joke, there was a lot to work with just with the technology side. You have to learn, there's a lot of specifics of the system, 4 million buttons you have to press in the correct sequence and all that. But also, how the planetarium works there is that there's like 4 guidelines of things you have to talk about when you prep a live show. I believe it's the Big Dipper and the North Star, any planets that you can see in the night sky, and then something else that I've forgotten, sorry buddy. But there's not very many set guidelines, and so then planetarium manager just lets you loose and you have to create it all by yourself. So you have to do a lot of research by yourself, which is very intimidating. But also, my show, I'm not a hard astronomer, that's not my background, and so I focus on constellations and how to find them. And so my show is a little bit more funny, a little bit designed to remember how to find things. So yeah, it is a lot of work up front, but once you do it, it's really, really easy. So yeah, if you're interested in that sort of thing, absolutely, it's worth it. But yeah, it is one of the largest undertakings and stuff you can train for, probably the largest. Yeah.
How did you apply for this type of an internship, and like, did you get to choose what you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, so the question was, how did I apply for this type of internship, and did I get to choose what I focus on? So how it works is you apply to just work normally at the museum, and then from there you talk to the same person that hires you. Brittany Burgess is the same person that coordinates these internships. And so, I don't know if I said it, sorry. I spoke earlier this morning, so things that I said during that and things that I'm saying now blur a little bit together, so I want to make sure I'm not double repeating myself. But you work with her, and a lot of people create Hod's Carts hands-on discovery stations, and so like I had a friend that just did an anthropology one about leg connections in the bones and that sort of thing. So you can either work with her, and so I went a little bit outside of the normal zone, and I talked to the planetarium manager, but really you get hired into the museum, and then you just kind of tell Brittany, hey, I am with Dr. Henneberry in the Museum Studies program. Can we work on an internship? And then from there, you usually do Hodscarts or some other thing, but you work with her mostly. I went a little bit of an odd route. I like to make things harder. Yes, George?
What language were you coding in when you were creating the show? Is it something specific to the planetarium software, or
Yeah.
is it more general?
So the question was, what language was I coding in? It is a proprietary language. It's like the Digistar language. Digistar is kind of the industry standard for the electronics and computer-based planetariums. And so Buddy just answered this question for someone else earlier this morning. He says it is similar to JavaScript. But yeah, it is its own thing in the back.
Thanks so much. Really fun to hear about what you've been doing. I wondered what your most satisfying moment was in trying out your product of the show that you created.
Okay, the most satisfying moment in trying out the product and what I created. That is a good one. I think the most satisfying moments, so I have these animations and I showed them a little bit earlier. They, for some reason, when you import them into the planetarium system, they just plop them somewhere. They're not where they need to be. And so like you have to move it around painstakingly. And since it's a 3D space and it's like space, it's extra weird. So it takes like 20 minutes. Like importing the file, super easy, drop it in. It takes like 20 minutes to line up in the spot of space that it's supposed to be. And then like if you look at it from a different angle, it'll be weird because it's like a 2D image that's in 3D space. So if you spin it wrong, then it's like side on. It's very it's not even complicated. It's just a painstaking, terrible process. And so with that one, I had a different set of artwork that I might use. That one had the stars in it. And so I had to line up the stars in the artwork to the stars that were actually displayed on the planetarium. And so it was like me and the manager in the dark saying like, no, to the right, spin it, no, move it, flip it over. And so it was just terrible. But when I finally got everything into place, I think that was the best part. It was such a nightmare. I'd be like, I was only here 2 hours, oh my God. Yeah.
Thank you, Josephine.
Yeah.
Okay, a museum spirit. And you do have a pointer
Oh,
if you want to be
perfect.
fancy.
I might just use it. Hello, my name is Chloe Ranger, and for my internship, I worked at Camp Explorations as the assistant director at the camp that the Natural History puts on, and I will be talking about that today. Thankfully, Josephine did a lot of the heavy lifting for our mission and our statement at the museum, but this is the location if you're new to campus or if you've never been. We encourage you to stop by. Yeah, and then the University of Michigan Museum of Natural History is an exhibiting museum of natural history. It's really great. We've got everything from dinosaurs to cells to the vast expanse of space that you can explore, so you should stop by. But my job specifically, I was the assistant director, and these were some of the main duties that I had. And I outlined them, and I will talk about them with you. So the official position started in the summer, because it's a summer camp, which is nice. It starts June, and it runs until the end of August, middle of August. And before that, me and my fellow assistant director, Dougie, we created the curriculum that we put on for the camp kids. And so this was collecting resources, collecting activities from other museums that they've used and put on, creating our own activities, just to help exemplify the science that we were trying to teach them in our themed weeks. And it was a 9-week program. And so that was really fun. So we created the curriculum, and then we organized the activities. When the time came to execute the activities, we gathered supplies, we handled objects for the kids to then use. and we organized spaces, and this was, we dealt a lot with talking to kind of like Josephine said, our bosses in the museum, the people who oversee us, so we can use their lab spaces, use their community spaces, just so that we can have the kids around the museum in a way that made sense, in a way that any exhibits that we had that were related to the activities they were doing were easily accessible, and so that they could get hands-on experience and visual visual aids for what they're learning. And then public outreach. As the assistant directors, Dougie and I were responsible for reaching out to the public, talking with parents, talking with like the very much administrative side of the camp. We processed payments, we made rosters and things, which was really fun. We learned about Excel, which was so much fun. And we learned the Google programs, the Excel programs. It was very fun. And then the blog, we were responsible for creating a blog. We did 2 blog posts for every week. We had a welcome to the camp. We sent it out to the parents. And that basically went over, we outlined 3 questions for each day that we had the camp. So we had 5 days of questions, and these were questions that the parents, after their kids had come home, can ask them, ask the kids about what they did, so they can go to this camp and then they can come home and they can talk about the science, and it's kind of a hands-on thing for both the kids and the camp counselors and the parents, so that they can reinforce what they learned at this expensive University of Michigan camp. So they weren't just forgetting it when they came home. So that was fun. And we had pictures, we had camp counselors take pictures, and we put those in the blog, so it was a way for the camp counselors to be involved as well. And I recommend you check it out. If you just search Camp Explorations Camp blog, there's some really cool things on there. And then object handling, of course, with the organizing activities. We checked out objects from our collections cases, and we gave those to the kids to handle and the camp counselors to handle. And then staff collaboration. It was the assistant directors with the camp counselors, the assistant directors and the camp counselors with Brittany, our lovely boss Brittany, and with other permanent staff, again, to use their spaces and use their public programs that they have already developed, so we can help the camp kids do those as well. And so those were the duties. One low light that I do want to point out is I'm not particularly like a kid person, but which is kind of crazy for a camp, for working at a summer camp, but I do enjoy the being around the kids and when they actually enjoy learning. But a low light would have been waking up at 7:30 and then the kids are crying and I'm like, okay. So if you're a kid person, I would really recommend you look into summer camp at this museum. It's really fun, it's really rewarding. The kids are great when they're really wanting to learn, they're wonderful, and the staff is great. And then a very big highlight was, again, the staff. Oh my gosh, the camp counselors are great. Shout out Josephine. And all of the permanent staff, getting to collaborate with them, kind of understand what their job is and where they stand in the museum administration. And getting to work with them to use their programs, but also develop new programs, kind of make recommendations about what the kids liked and what they can implement in everyday museum programming, which was really fun. And then I just have some pictures from camp. We take a lot of trips to the ARB because we do mainly natural history focused activities and themes. And so this is actually one of these favorites. These 2 are from, they're so fun. These ones are from CSI week in the morning. So we have AM and PM sessions and they do different activities. But this one, we kind of orchestrated a crime for the kids to solve. And this one was stolen lemonade powder. And we put lemonade powder on the floor with a shoe print in it. And we left fingerprints for the kids to lift. And then they lifted the shoe print. And then they compared it. And they actually interviewed staff members. And so they got to go back into their authorized area. And they had a lot of fun. And they write in their journals all their observations. And then this was us planning the crime for the older kids. This is Dougie, the other assistant director, and I stood on top of one of the display cases in the museum store that houses the geodes. And we filmed them coming into the store and taking all the rock candy and then like scurrying out. I wish I had the video, but I don't. Well, that was really fun. So again, you get to work with some really awesome people. And then this was one of the walks to the ARB. So we go to the ARB a lot for ecology and environment days. And then we have like our parachute that we bring out. And the kids always complain on the walk, but they love getting there because it's a big open field and we bring all the balls and we have activities that are about ecology. But this particular day, our last day, we got caught in the rain. So that's all the kids scrambling. And then we collaborate with other museums and institutions. So this was the Leslie Science and Nature Center. They brought in some animals. This is our hedgehog, or their hedgehog. And they brought them in and they kind of talked about the hedgehog and brought it around for the kids to see, which was really fun. And then, yeah, just reiterating the amazing people. I really recommend you come to the Natural History Museum, either as a docent, because I also am a docent with Josephine. But yeah, it leads into more opportunities to be involved with the planetarium or camp or really anything. But yeah, these are people that we worked with. Up here, that's Doug. We sat in the back office. We didn't get really to interact with the kids as much. We really just helped out with the bad kids. But between, we got to use some cool objects. And then this was like a morning because we were doing ancient Mesopotamia Day. And we were learning to play checkers because, well, I was teaching the counselors how to play checkers because they hadn't played checkers before, and so that they could then teach the kids. And then this is all of the staff, which is pretty cool. Josephine's over there. Woohoo. And then this is Brittany. And then everybody else. But yeah.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
Any quick questions for Chloe?
Yes, Josephine.
Besides CSI, what was your favorite activity to run?
Ooh. I really liked Dino Days just because there were so many collections that we could bring out for the kids. And we're a Natural History Museum, we have all of the dinosaurs out permanently. And so they would walk around and all the kids would like tell the camp counselors, because we have camp counselors who are like art students, or we have camp counselors who are like me, who are like anthropology students. So dinosaurs really aren't our specialty. And so the kids who do come, they're really knowledgeable, especially during Dino Week. And so they'll come up and they'll be like, that's the Majungasaurus, and I'm going to tell you 5 facts about it right now. I'm like, okay. But I think Dino Days, one activity I was particularly proud of was we made coprolites, which, anybody who doesn't know what a coprolite is, it's dinosaur poop. So we gave them brown Play-Doh, and we had them put like pasta and twigs that they collected in it, and like pasta would represent like animal bones. So if their poop had pasta in it, was a carnivore's poop, and if it had the twigs they collected from outside, it was an herbivore because it was herbivore poop. And that was really fun. I think the kids enjoyed it too, but yeah. So there's a bunch of fun activities. Yeah.
Is there another question back there? I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
So, coming in as a sort of assistant director,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of training did you have to wear those many hats of planning the curriculum, and
Yeah.
what were your resources?
What were the question was, what were the resources and what training did I have? We had a 1-hour meeting learning how to use the Camp Doc system, which is the system that everybody goes through to register the kids and make payments. And that's how they request refunds and all of that. So we had a 1-hour training, and then Brittany was like, well, you've done camp before, because both Dougie and I were camp counselors the previous summer. And so she was kind of like, plan. And so she's like, you've done this before. You know about what you're doing. Go for it. And then we'd create like a master doc of like all of our weeks outlining the curriculum and the activities that we do. And then she'd come through and edit. She'd be like, oh, we have actual curriculum for that. I'll tag it here. So she was very helpful, but it was very much a learn as you go, which I do appreciate. And it's a lot of the staff members that we do see around the hallways, so it wasn't particularly uncomfortable or unfamiliar to approach them with questions. But yeah, so. All right. Of course. Thank you.
I sent you, I gave you access to the actual Google slide rather than the PDF.
Oh, you did do?
Yeah, I don't know why I sent you it as a PDF.
Doesn't matter. I've opened it as a PDF, but we're good.
Cool.
Okay, so you do need to use the mic. There we go. And it's just the advance arrow key.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yes, help yourself to beverage and pizza.
Cool. My name is Hunter. I've been working at the UMA now for just over a year and a half. I put my year just because it sounded better. But yeah.
Fair enough.
I'm an art handler, so mainly we pull art for class visits, and we put them either in the top room, which is paper study, and the bottom, which is object study. And yeah, so most of the time the class will choose, or not the class, the professor of the class will choose art that kind of relates to the coursework that the class is working on. They're kind of like temporary mini exhibitions that last for like an hour, and then we have to just put them back into storage. One thing that's pretty fun is not all of the classes, or I would even say a majority of the classes, are art history. They're very from a range of different departments at the university. We've done engineering classes, medical classes, physics. We do have a lot of art history classes as well, but yeah, it's interesting to see how all of these different fields interact with visual art. Yeah, so we also pull objects for researchers and professors who are just curious about objects that are in their field, and also conferences. So this one on the left is a 12th century Cambodian guardian lion, which weighs about 600 pounds. And my colleague and I had to move it on a Friday morning, which wasn't the most fun thing, but it was rewarding. And it was along with many other very heavy objects. There was a Buddha head that was also 700 pounds. They were all in crates. Yeah. And then the one on the right I put because it's an Ansel Adams landscape, and there was an Argus conference a month ago, and Argus is a camera factory that was based in Ann Arbor, and now it's a grocery store. Well, now a grocery store is named after it, but there's a museum with in the factory, I guess. But yeah, so we pulled a bunch of photos for all these people that work at the Argus Museum. I'm told that one of the people that was there was Ansel Adams' grandson, but I don't want to speculate. Pretty cool if it was. This is another thing I wanted to highlight. The museum was donated a huge collection of Chinese calligraphy, and oftentimes we have researchers who come in and look at the collection. We've had the same researcher that's been coming in every Friday for the entire semester. She was there today. But there was also a conference that lasted an entire weekend. So I was on a Friday and Saturday. There were at least 50 hanging scrolls and hand scrolls. So we had to sort of display them and then put them up in front of all of these researchers, and then also go through these hand scrolls. And some of them are 60 feet long and that wide, and you just leaf after leaf after leaf, and then all of these researchers are just just staring, and then they take photos, and they're okay, next one, and then I'll tell you to go back, and you have to roll it up. It's fun. Very fun. In the 2022-23 academic year, my colleague and I pulled just over 1,500 objects, which is crazy to me because it doesn't feel like that. We have about 30 to 40 class sessions every semester. Yeah, I guess it doesn't I don't think about those things when I'm pulling them, but I put these images up because these are the ones that we pulled the most. I actually have notes here as to what they are because I forgot. The first one is a photo by Lauren Greenfield, and we pulled this one 15 times in one semester, or no, in the academic year, pardon me. And then the second one is a Carrie Mae Weems after Manet, and that was 7. And the third is an Arbus that we pulled 6 times. They're all photographs, which is interesting. I think the top 5 most pulled objects are photographs. People really interact with our photography collection, which is nice. I put these up here because I just wanted to show the range of objects that I pull. This is a Japanese Netsuki, which is like 2 inches. It's like this big. We have a drawer full of them. And they're just like little decorative little sculptures that would be like worn on belts. But yeah, it's very tiny. And then the second one is a photo by, forgot the name, Anthony Guaicolia. It's called The Last Supper, but it's 6 feet by 4. So it's huge, and it's also heavy. And it's mounted on this very like sturdy backing, and we have to cart it through the museum when it's closed or when it's open because we didn't. I was bad at time management. Yeah. And I've also sort of, in turn, especially when it's slow during the summer, I've made friends with one of the techs who builds all of the exhibitions, and over the summer I helped put together this very amazing exhibition, Hear Me Now, which came to UMA from the MFA. The UMA is the only university museum who's going to be able to put this exhibition on view, which is really, really cool, and I would really, really recommend seeing it because it's going to be taken down in January, so see it while you can. But yeah, these huge walls, I built them with the tech. Yeah, it was really fun. And then all of the track lights that are up at the top, I put the bulbs in all like 80 of them. So that was me. Yeah, there's a video of me sleeping on the floor on all this mound of bubble wrap, but I didn't want to show it because I didn't want to implicate anyone. And then this one, a little smaller, but this was my first foray into exhibition building. This little wall, which had to be built for the curriculum collection to be able to show this John Waters film strip of this movie that he did in the 60s, I think. But yeah, it's not as, of course, big or amazing as these, but it's honest work. It's my first one. Yeah, it's really, really fun. I've been lucky enough to, like, UMA is kind of a small team, so often like my job overlaps with the registrar or the techs who help build exhibitions. I'm in December, when class visits are a little more slow, helping build some bases for a new exhibition that's going to be in February. Yeah, but additionally, I also get to work in storage and have access to all of the collection. Yeah, which is really fun as an art history major because I can kind of just look at stuff with no leash. So, yeah. Yeah, that's all I had. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah.
Hi. I don't know if you know the answer, but as Hear Me Now is a traveling exhibit, do you know how much the UMA had to change in the exhibit design to fit the space, and who had the say to do that?
That was it was the techs, Matt and Kate, and I believe the actual design of the space fell more on Matt's shoulders, or maybe it did Kate's as well, but I sit near Matt and I saw him on SketchUp a lot, building it. So I was like, oh, I know what you're doing from Museums 301, if anyone gets that joke. But yeah, it was first at the Met, and then it went to the MFA, and now it's at UMA. But yeah, there were a lot of like meetings while I was helping put like the lights together, and my colleague and I were, I believe, like screwing in wood. There were a lot of people that worked, I believe, like they work in the same office as me, but I don't really know if they do. But yeah, they were touring, and like it was like a collaborative thing. But I guess it was Matt, because I saw him on SketchUp a lot. Yeah.
So fun hearing about what you've been doing, and I wondered, I mean, you have like industry, like standard, like experience here, right?
Yeah.
Like a year and a half, like while you're in college. That's actually amazing.
Oh.
And you know, you could walk into a job in any major museum with that kind of couple of years experience of art handling. It's like, I'm really like excited and like to hear that you get to do that. So yeah, I mean, are there many undergrads who are getting this experience like in art handling, and yeah, could you tell me a bit more about how that came about?
Well, fun story. I was studying abroad, and basically Professor Hinderberry emailed me one day and was like, hey, they need an art handler. And I interviewed while I was in France for an art history program, and yeah, I came back with a job, which is great. But before that, my managers told me, so my colleague who recently graduated, they were an undergrad, but before that, it was majority grad students. And I think my colleague Lynn, well, actually, I heard the previous registrar the previous registrar was like, you two are like our guinea pigs to see if undergrad students can do it. And she was like, I'm pleasantly surprised. So, but now my new coworker, he is also an undergrad. So my manager told me that she likes to hire people who are like sophomores, because they give us all of these training, and if you're like a senior, then it's like in a year you're gone, you know, they have to get someone else in. But yeah, I think they're pivoting to hiring more undergrads, because yeah, it is great experience. Very thankful for it. Yes.
Are you forklift certified to move the big stuff, or do you have to get like 10 people?
Oh,
Like the 600 pounders?
we don't use forklifts. We just have a pallet jack, and we just roll it under the pallet, and you know, there are a lot of elevators that are very wonderfully placed, so we can just, not a lot of, it's pretty easy once you get it on the pallet jack. When you get it on it, your job is done. Smooth sailing, unless the museum's open and it's like 10 minutes before an hour and there's a class being let out, then that's generally not good. But yeah, other than that, it's not the hardest thing. Yes.
What kind of previous experience do you need for this kind of job or position?
I had none, but my previous colleague, I was living in the same house as them. So that's another big factor as to how I got the job, because I didn't know that they worked at UMA. But then when I got the job, my manager was like, yeah, Lynn gave us a great well, actually Lynn was just like, yeah, he's a great guy. And then they were like, and then they said that's what, also because they can keep track of us because we live in the same house. But they've graduated and it's not the same anymore. But yeah, no prior experience required.
They train you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hunter.
Yeah, no problem.
Mason, it looks like you just sent me new slides. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi everyone, how's it going? I'm A little bit of a rhetorical question, but you know. So my name is Mason, and I spent my museum's 409, number, bad with numbers. I did my museum studies internship at the other UMA, which is the University of Michigan Museum of Anthropological Archaeology. But if you don't distinguish it, everyone just kind of assumes you're talking about the art museum. So, AA UMA. A few quick facts about UMA is that it was founded in 1922 as the Museum of Anthropology, but its roots go back before that, all the way back to 1837, I believe, which was the founding of the General University Museum. And then as time went on, they kind of split off into anthropological archaeology, art, paleontology. So the museum collection is approximately 3 million objects. That number is approximate. The guess is that the majority of those are like potsherds and other fragmentary objects. It has a very broad collecting scope, 10 different ranges. I'm not going to read all of them. And it is located in the Research Museum Center, which is off campus. It used to be located in the Ruthven building, but then they got a really nice new purpose-built facility, which houses anthropological archaeology, paleontology, zoology, and the herbarium. I don't think I'm leaving anyone out. Okay. And something that is unique about UMA versus some of the other museums that we've heard about today is that it is not an exhibiting museum. It doesn't have exhibiting space. It's really like a lab with a collection, and it does occasionally loan things out to other museums on campus or community partners that are not affiliated with the University of Michigan. My role at UMA was that I was a collections intern. I worked really closely with the collections managers, Andrea Blazer and Jim Moss, and also occasionally worked with Bruce Warden, who is a graphic designer and illustrator at the museum. Collections managers wear a lot of hats. The role looks a little different depending on what kind of museum you work at, but sometimes collections managers and registrars are two different roles. At UMA, they're kind of the same. So my roles, instead of having like one dedicated project that I worked on all summer, I was kind of a general assistant. And my tasks kind of fell into three broad categories. I worked with the museum archives, where I did a lot of document scanning, library cataloging, rehousing, creating finding aids, database stuff, and those two kind of categories have to do with record keeping, because when you have any kind of collection, but especially a collection as vast as UMA's, it's important that you maintain really meticulous records about your stuff, where it's been, who's worked with it, if any work has been done to it, any research that has been done pertaining to it. You want to have a really good handle on where that information is so that it doesn't get lost and we know everything we can about the objects. And then the third category is physical care of objects. So that would be like rehousing, which means like having a dedicated container to the object that's going to be safe and sustainable for it, and other types of stuff. And spoiler alert, a main theme of this talk is kind of going to be that it's important in all aspects of the museum, not just forward-facing ones, that you walk the walk in addition to talking the talk in terms of being decolonial with your museum practices. That can be done in something that even seems as like scientific and objective, scare quotes, as collections management. You can incorporate that, and it's important to do that while maintaining an understanding that the museum's founding was maybe not the most kosher. And we'll get into that. So, starting right off the bat, I'm not going to read all of this. You can scan it. You can see that it is extremely outdated, the language being used, but this is dissertation research from James B. Griffin, who was an early curator of the museum, and this is from 1933, I want to say, and as part of his dissertation research, he was really interested in indigenous ceramics. So he and his partner, Carlton W. Angel, they constructed a collection of ceramics using indigenous techniques, or what they thought were indigenous techniques, because at the time a lot of the anthropological practice centered around the idea that indigenous groups were disappearing, which we now know is not the case at all. And so they made all of these practices, all of these pieces of pottery without actually talking to indigenous people, which is a little weird. We don't do that anymore. But when Griffin retired, he left his pottery collection from his dissertation research in the museum. And for a really long time, we just didn't know what to do with it. We were like, does this make sense to add to the collection? Does it not? And within the last year, the decision was made to accession it and formally add it to the museum's collection because it is significant to the history of the museum. So I was responsible for cataloging the collection. There were about 30 objects in it. Most of them were pieces of ceramics, but there were also a few tools that he and Angel used to make the pottery. So I cataloged it, I did some of the photography, and I was responsible for finding an appropriate place to store it. I also did loan installation, and I thought that the Griffin pottery collection and this loom were interesting to juxtapose next to each other because they kind of represent the past and future directions of the museum. This backstrap loom, it's a Pinahad backstrap loom from the Philippines, and it was created by Kathy Domingue, who is a master weaver from the Philippines, and she was a resident scholar who came to work with objects in UMA and work with us at the University of Michigan as a part of Project Reconnect Recollect, which I was not directly involved in, but I did have the opportunity to help out with sometimes just as a general museum assistant. This loom is currently, it's really huge, it's 8 feet tall. It's currently on display in the rotunda of the Ruthven building, which is where the president's offices are now. And whenever something goes out on loan, even if it's a cross-campus loan, you want to be very careful of the condition and keeping an eye on how it looks when it's leaving the museum. You actually write 4 separate condition reports. When something leaves your institution, you write one, and then when it arrives to go on display at the where the loan is going, and then when it comes off of display, and then finally when it returns home. So we're very thorough with that. And that's me taking a big picture of it, but I also literally went in and like where all of the strings are wrapped around the sticks, the whole thing. If there were splits, if there were frays, it was documented. And then this is in the rotunda of the Ruthven building. That device reads light levels on the object. Textiles are really, really sensitive to light. I'm sure a lot of you know that as museum people. So we wanted to make sure that the amount of light on the object was going to be sustainable for it to be on display for 6 months, which textiles really shouldn't be on display for that long anyways, but that's beside the point. But we did find out with that reader that the light needed to be adjusted, and it was. And this is just one more picture, housing and rehousing. I talked a little bit about what that entails. I learned how to make boxes, like custom fit boxes for objects out of archival blueboard, which was pretty cool, and hot glue. And that is a sample of agave fiber from our ethnographic collection. Things were being shifted around in that part of our storage, and so it was determined that the agave needed to be boxed to protect it from other objects that were stored in the same place. And I got to build the boxes, and that's the first box I ever built. Highlights and takeaways. This slide's kind of a mess, but we're almost to the end. I really enjoyed working with Project Reconnect Recollect. It's like I said, it was a really great way of observing and being involved with community partnerships and restorative justice and stuff that's a little more behind the scenes. You see those kinds of community partnerships a lot in public-facing stuff. So I think it's important that people know that that's going on throughout the world of the museum. I got to apply a lot of concepts that I'd learned in different museum studies classes to the actual work I'm doing in the museum, or did in the museum. And a lot of that involved like understanding how donations and bequests work. the thought process behind the decision to accept or politely decline a donation. I didn't do any actual provenance research, but I discussed provenance research with people that were in the museum, and that was pretty interesting to kind of see the thought process behind whether or not to accept an object. Cataloging and object description. I did a lot of object description. And learning how to use collections management software. That was a pretty steep learning curve, probably the most steep learning curve, because those databases get really, really complicated. The only lowlight is I just wish I could have been there longer, because it was, a 3-month internship, and I was finally getting to the point where, I felt comfortable working independently around the museum. I was figuring out the collections management software. I could make boxes by myself, harder than it looks. But yeah, that was my internship in a quick talk. Questions?
Quick question, yeah.
What standards were you using for cataloging and object description?
What standards was I using for cataloging and object description?
Were you using Dublin Core, CDWA?
We had a custom standard. It was loosely based on Dublin Core. Our collections management system was Collective Access, which we used because it's open source and we could really customize it. But yeah, it was loosely based on Dublin Core. Any other questions? I know it's 5 o'clock, so.
We're gonna have, I have questions I'll ask you later, but Eva, there you are. It's like, behind the tail, okay. We have one more presentation. While we set this up, please take more pizza. Let's see here.
Sorry, I left my notes up
No,
here.
I like her notes up here. Let's see.
Okay. Ooh, uh-oh.
Pointer if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. It's all good.
Last but not least, Ava will share her work with us.
Okay, hello. Thank you guys for sticking around. I'm going to be talking about my 409 internship, which I did this past summer at the Detroit Institute of Arts. So if any of you guys aren't familiar with the Detroit Institute of Arts, it's located in Detroit, Michigan, and it actually just won the USA Today's Best Art Museum Award for 2023. So that's kind of a cool little flex. And here I put their mission and vision statement, which is basically to be like the town square and of like a community gathering place. If any of you grew up in Metro Detroit or have taken 301 and learned about the Grand Bargain, it is free admission to anybody in the surrounding counties, which is, I think, something super cool and makes it very accessible to the community. Okay, and then getting into a little bit of what I did, I interned in the exhibitions department. My overall schedule was about 24 hours a week for 12 weeks, so I was there from, I think, the end of May through August. It was a really great time. And my role was actually very administrative. I did a lot of behind-the-scenes work, not so much with the collections themselves or the visitors, but more so with a lot of the stakeholders and other museum professionals. So yeah, in my department, we had my director, who I reported to. We had 3 or 4 exhibition project managers, a graphic designer, and a lighting designer. So I got to shadow all of them a little bit and see what they do. I got to help with some of the installation for some of the labels that came through, which was super cool. But the primary focus of what I was doing was an institution-wide project to redefine like standardized practice. I know that sounds a little bit wordy, but basically what I was doing was meeting with stakeholders from each department and documenting the process of putting up an exhibition from the moment a curator or somebody has a glimmer of an idea all the way till the last crate is packaged up and it's going back into storage. So pretty weighty, but it was super cool to be able to talk to all these different departments. We talked with visitor engagement people, research engagement,